Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining the CIPS Victorian Branch webinar on the topic, Best Value Procurement Model, an Alternative Approach to RFP. My name is Sharon Morris, General Manager of CIPS Australia and New Zealand, and we're delighted to have over 450 registered attendees from all over the globe with us today. So thank you to those who are attending for the first time, welcome, and to those who are joining us again, welcome back. But without further ado, allow me to hand over to Andrew Mcfarlane, a Fellow of our profession, Victorian Branch Committee member and the host for today's webinar. Over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and a warm welcome to everyone who has joined us for this webinar today. As Sharon mentioned, I'm a member of the CIPS committee and I'm also the host and moderator for today's webinar. So moving along to the program, allow me to introduce our speaker for today, John Matter. So John is the founder and managing director for J&T Consulting, a management consulting firm that helps organisations bring real value through innovative procurement approaches and advanced analytics. Since he found his passion in procurement, John has developed a reputation of bringing innovation and new ideas to enhance procurement outcomes. John has extensive experience running advanced procurement tenders for major and complex projects with high profile within the Victorian government using the best value procurement model. So on to the topic for today. Have you ever been daunted by the time and resources necessary to run a traditional full RFP tender? I know I certainly have. So well, today John is going to present an alternative approach, the best value procurement model. It promises to be interesting and thought-provoking. I'll now hand over to John. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Andrew. If I hit now all the right buttons, you should all be seeing my screen. So thanks everyone for joining us today on this webinar. I trust you will enjoy today's experience. As Andrew outlined, we are going to give you an overview and maybe share with you our experience with the best value procurement model and maybe explain to you what that model is and how it helped many organizations around the globe to get a much better results over the traditional procurement approach that we're all used to. So the best value procurement model has been originated from Arizona State University in the US. They started developing and researching this approach in 1992, so approximately over 25 years ago. They have worked during this journey with more than 100 different organizations across the US, Canada, Europe, and now in Australia, with thousands of successful projects. They have now got an institute called Simpler Institute, where it contains a group of researchers and educators that work with both vendors and clients to help them optimize the outcome of their procurement projects. For the first 10 years of that research period, they have actually been focusing primarily on the construction project. But then after that, they've really expanded to a lot of different industries, as you can see in there. And what was found is that the same challenges they faced in constructions are the same they faced in facilities management, in IT, professional services, which means that these principles can be really applied regardless of the industry you're trying to work with. So I would like to walk you through some of the concepts first from what we've learned from this process, and then I will walk you through some of the ideas of how best value it is different from the traditional approach when you're conducting an RFP. So the first tip we typically do is we get together and we're trying to define our needs, our scope, and then we issue that to the market, and the vendors are required then to respond to that. And here, when I present this face-to-face, I would normally ask my audience, what % of the time our scope is 100% accurate? And I'm sure most people would probably agree that this is almost never happening to get 100% accurate scope. When we ask that question to suppliers, guess how much they say? 0. So we issue this, and who do we hire? And if you look at this picture closely, what is the problem here really? Even if we did have a great scope of work, when do we find out that we hired the wrong person? When it's too late. And now how much pain and suffering are we now exposed to? And how much will it cost us internally from resources and money maybe trying to fix that? The idea here is to let's try to avoid this from happening in the first place. And the way you do that is through your procurement process. Your RFP evaluation and selection process is one of the most critical tools we can use to ensure we get high-performing suppliers. So how can we fix this dilemma? But before looking at how can we make things better, we need to see how suppliers really react to our RFPs. So think about it. If we put ourselves in the supplier's shoes, what if the vendor thinks that the owner has a favorite supplier, or the process is not fair, or it's too much work? If the supplier has those perceptions, whether we agree or not with them, that would impact first the number of proposals that we receive, because they might decide not to propose. But if they proposed, they might not invest any time to put forward a quality proposal. Sometimes they might not assign their best people, and in some cases they might increase their price. So the trick becomes now, how can we attract expert suppliers and make them believe that we are going to give them a fair chance at winning? And of course, we want to do this in a manner that is open, fair, and transparent, value, and more importantly, efficient, both for vendors and the client. And that brings us to the best value procurement system, or the expertise-driven project delivery approach. And I just wanted to say that I won't have enough time during the limitation of the webinar's time to go into too much details about the process. But what I will do, I will focus on some of the major differences associated with this approach. On a very high level, the best value approach has really two major phases: the selection phase and the clarification phase. In the selection phase, we ask suppliers to submit certain information that is carefully been researched and proven to help evaluators quickly identify and single out the highest qualified supplier, which gets invited into the phase 2, the clarification phase. So in phase 1, everyone compete. Then we shortlist and narrow down to one vendor that makes it to the clarification phase. With that one vendor, we do a very detailed pre-planning clarification to make sure that this supplier hasn't missed anything. The award happens after phase 2. So now I'll walk you through some of the critical differences and advantages of the best value approach over the traditional way of conducting an RFP or a tender process. The first thing you will see in this approach that it greatly reduces and improves the procurement timelines. And when we look at what information the clients or owners are asking to evaluate in the traditional approach, we can see so many different things the suppliers need to turn in as part of their proposal. So in this sample criteria, we ask for cost, project plan, capability and experience, past projects, and the list just goes on and on. But then how do our evaluators really evaluate this information? Now, we're not asking on how they should be evaluating this proposal, how they actually evaluate this proposal. Do the evaluators really read every single page of every proposal on every submittal? I don't know about your experience, but in over 25 years of research in this, and in my personal experience, we have met maybe very limited number of people that can actually have the time and, more importantly, the desire to read every single page of their proposal. Because if you think about it, if you receive, say, 5 proposals, and they are 40 to 50 pages on average, how can the evaluators go through 200 or 250 pages thoroughly and grasp all the information included in order to assign a score? plus doing their own work in a 2 or 3 weeks period. On top of that, how many evaluators really wake up in the morning, really looking forward to evaluate proposal? Once again, this is not just an opinion that I'm conveying to you. All these have been deeply researched and tested over a long period of time. So an example may be useful to understand the effect of that. So this was a multi-billion-dollar high-tech facility, and the client asked the supplier to submit so many different things. The client received 6 different proposals, and on one item, which is the safety plan, the average of just the safety plan was more than 350 pages. Then the evaluation team assigned 2.5 weeks just to evaluate this component. At the end of the 2 weeks period, the difference in the score between suppliers on the safety plan was just less than 10%, 2%. So are we suggesting that safety is not important, or are we saying just ignore it completely? Of course we're not. But what we're saying is that the evaluation process should really focus on differentials. So if something is not going to help you differentiate expertise, we suggest not to use it as an evaluation criteria at this moment in the process. And that's maybe one of the beautiful things about this process. We can now look only in the information that truly helps identifying expertise. Once again, this requested information has been carefully researched and tested and refined over so many years. And there are very strong reasons why each of these documents will quickly help evaluators identifying the expert supplier. And maybe in future sessions, when we have maybe some more time, we can go and dive a bit deeper into those reasons. So how long should the proposals be that we asking the suppliers to submit? Again, if we considering our evaluators and admitting all the facts that we have just mentioned, what we're suggesting is the evaluated document should be limited to 6 to 8 pages long. And I know that might sound shocking for many people, and if you think that, like, you're not alone, there's so many people, when they hear that for the first time, it's a little bit uncomfortable for so many people. But through the research and the actual experience applying this, no matter how big or complex your project, this is all you need to really single out expertise based on that specific information that we ask the suppliers to submit. And this has been applied on a few $1,000s project and a multi-billion-dollar project. So in this case here, this was a comparison study on one of the state's government clients in the US to understand the impact that best value had in their environment, where they collected information about 5 projects that ranges from 200 million to 500 millions. And you can see the numbers here on the left. So many proposals for 34, 650 pages per proposal. And they actually took similar number of projects with the same scale or even higher. So they took from 200 to even $900 million. And what they found is that they actually first got more competition on their proposals. So 62 compared to 34. And the average number of pages per proposal, 7 pages. And it took the evaluation team combined 12 days to go through that 62 proposals. The second big advantage we have found in the best value approach is it is improving massively the fairness and maximizing the competition in your RFP. If we recall that perception that the suppliers might have in their mind on how the procurement process is not fair, or the client will always pick a big name or their favorite, how can we truly squash that perception and make the suppliers believe that we're really gonna give them a fair chance at winning? Well, we found that there's one single action that can massively change that perception, and that is to make the proposal completely anonymous. So the evaluated document will not have any company name, any project names, any software names, any names that can be used to identify who the supplier is. And here I want to say that if you're not feeling comfortable with this concept, again, you are not alone. This is maybe by far one of the difficult concepts to grasp for many people. Most clients wouldn't feel comfortable with this, but on the supplier side, 99% would love this idea. And maybe the only 1% wouldn't like it is the favorite or the incumbent or the supplier that has always been relying on their name or relationship to win your project. On this specific concept, I can really talk for hours on the benefits it brings to the entire procurement process. But maybe one thing I would say now is we've learned that an expert company isn't necessarily just a name of a company. So an expert has no correlation to the name of the company, because in many cases you might hire a company, and you can see that a lot in the construction. You hire a company that do very well on a project, and you hire the same company, and it's a total disaster. What's different here is the actual people, it's the actual team. And if we bear with me a few slides, I will address how can we actually, through this process, ensure that we are getting the best team. Just a case study about the anonymity component. This was a wireless network out in Canada. And you can see firm one got the highest score. They've even got the cheapest cost proposal. The client hired this company, and the supplier did a great job. They have debriefed the subject matter experts on the client side at the end. And the subject matter experts said, in the traditional approach, this supplier would have never got this high score just because no one has heard of them. And they were not trying to be biased or something, but they just thought it's too risky to go with a firm that they have never heard of. So in terms of what happens, the suppliers submit the proposals to like the procurement agent or the buyer, and that person will separate the documents that will go to the evaluation team, which approach, risk, value, and innovation, from all the other documents, cost, schedule, and any other items. The evaluation team will evaluate those documents individually, not as a team, and they will submit their scores back to the buyer. The buyer will again collect all the scores, putting them on a matrix, and add the scores for the cost and the other elements to that. From there, we shortlist the top 3 or top 5 firms and invite them for an interview. And here, the third benefit of the best value process, that is, ensures that we are getting the best team. So let's take a look at some of the differences on how best value dealing with that issue. So if you look traditionally, the suppliers interviews are conducted with the sales and marketing, or maybe the senior executives from the supplier. They might have their technical experts in the room, but who does really most of the talking? It's normally the sales, marketing, or the president. The format of this interview is typically a presentation from the supplier, which they can do very well because they practice it. And they generally make lots of promises and tell you everything you want to hear. And most of the time, the supplier focus here is on how to get a job versus describing to you how they actually going to do the work. So you very rarely would hear a supplier say, we're really disappointed to be here today, or this is going to be one of our least important projects. We are not really dedicated, committed to making this a success, or we're going to assign our least experienced staff to run this project. Very rarely you hear that. So in the best approach, we do things a little different. The research has shown really that the biggest impact on the success on any project is the people, getting the right team, regardless of what the procurement is. The ability and expertise of team members that will be running your project is one of the very critical elements to drive success on your project. So in the best value approach, we will be conducting an actual interview, almost like a job interview, and it's not a presentation. We want to meet the actual people that will be running the project. So we typically invite 1 or 2 key personnel. So in the construction project, we might invite the project manager, site superintendent, and an IT project lead, integration lead. No sales or executives or any other people will be allowed in the room. We will interview these key personnel individually, not as a team. And it's typically 20 to 30 minutes per session or per person. Again, the goal here is not trying to intimidate the interviewee, but to identify how well they really understand your project needs and unique circumstances. So a standard set of questions that will be asked to each individual. The best question we normally ask is we get them on a whiteboard and we ask them to walk us through their approach to deliver this project with identifying major milestones or stages with approximate time durations, and maybe identifying the major risks and major challenges in each of those phases. And if you think about this, who can really answer that question? Someone that really has that expertise, but not only that, he actually spent some time to think about your specific project, your specific challenges, and use their expertise to minimize those risks. Again, once we finalize the scores of the interviews, we add that score to the matrix and we'll finalize the prioritization table and we single out the highest ranked supplier. Again, the highest ranked supplier will get invited into the clarification phase. Up until this moment, we still haven't made an award, and we go into the clarification phase. We pretty much iron out every detail of the project and pre-plan that entire project with them. And one of the main reasons why this approach has been so successful, it's because we're actually pre-planning with an expert. So I'll just go through some of the quick case studies of the project that I've personally run here in Australia. So we've undertaken a number of projects here that range from $250K up to $75 million. The average number of proposals we received on each occasion was 6 proposals. The evaluation team spent less than 5 days to evaluate these proposals. And I cannot tell you, maybe Carl will share that the customer satisfaction of the outcome of this process. One of our most recent project was a mixed waste removal site where we asked suppliers to come and process and dispose a large volume over 300,000 cubic meter of mixed waste. The budget was over 50 million. The RFP timeline was just 3 months from January to March. There was some unique challenges with this project that we had very limited historical information about the composition of the waste. So that means there was lots of unknowns that we had to deal with. Very aggressive timelines. The RFP issued in early January and the contract needed to be awarded by end of March. The best value approach would be new to client and vendor. So that required additional education upfront for both sides. We have also some external consultants involved in the process where they were unfamiliar and also uncomfortable with conducting a non-traditional procurement approach. When we look at the results, we actually received a very high competitive project. We received 10 proposals. The evaluated proposal documents with 8 pages. Again, that was over $50 million project. The evaluation team spent 4 days. We shortlisted the top 5 suppliers. And one of the elements, or one of the concepts of the process is we actually encouraging clients to release and publish their budget as part of the RFP. So we actually published the budget, and the average proposal that we've received is 26% below the budget. I know that sounds like counterintuitive. Some people would say if you said you've got $1 million, then everybody will come to $1 million. But in reality, that doesn't happen because they have to be cost competitive to each other. Again, 10 proposals. The highest ranked supplier was 77% above the average on the approach, 57% above the average on the risk, 31% innovation, and 80% above the average on the interviews. Again, keep in mind that these 3 documents has been done anonymously and no cost information has been shared to the evaluation team. The highest ranked supplier got also the cheapest or the best cost proposal, almost 22% below the average. I'll just close out here. We must do things differently as owners or as clients or as procurement agents if we want our suppliers to change what they're doing currently. The best value approach, again, has been a proven approach for over 25 years, and it has shown a really outstanding results globally. The concepts, which I've touched very, very high level on them, they might be simple, but there's a lot of structure and mechanics that happens behind that approach, which requires a lot of education and training before an organization can start doing this on their own. I think I've finished. I will hand this over again to Andrew.
Many thanks, John, for your presentation on an important, what I think everybody would say is a very important procurement skill and tool, and possibly the most important one. Just a friendly reminder to everyone to utilise the Q&A box to ask any questions that you may have for the presenter and the panel. For today's session, we look forward to answering them, as many of your questions during the Q&A session at the end. Now, to dig a little deeper into this alternative approach, we've invited a client of John's to provide some viewpoints as a user. Before we head into some questions, let me introduce Carl Gray. Carl is a manager at the Environmental Protection Authority here in Victoria, where he manages major cleanup projects. For sites that have been deemed as the largest waste sites that Victoria has encountered, his role oversees and manages the entire cleanup operation. Carl's extensive expertise has put him in a strong position to successfully manage these unique and complex projects. So while the audience is submitting some questions, I have a few questions for John and Carl. Let me start with you, John. What type of tenders is the best value procurement model most suited?
Okay, the Simpler Institute has performed nearly thousands of different types of projects, including construction, engineering, consulting, IT. The process takes some time really to educate both the supplier and the client on this. So I wouldn't really recommend applying this on something that's very simple or low risk or a commodity type of purchase. I would recommend doing this on a procurement that's very risky, and the risky here means if it's high value, if it's high risk or a complex, and if you're really looking forward to partner with the highest qualified supplier, then I would absolutely recommend going with this approach.
Thanks, John. Now a question for you, Carl. As the client, what was your first impression when you were introduced to the best value model approach? And has any of that changed after you've actually gone through the process?
Hi, Andrew. Thanks, and thanks for having me on today. Look, initially I was very nervous and hesitant, as you can imagine, to do something different. But we knew we had to do things differently to get the correct expert supplier in this situation. As you outlined in the intro there, I'm managing a complex project regarding waste that requires specialised skills and knowledge. So this, I guess, method was presented to me and I was about to undertake a smaller procurement contract. So having been through many procurement processes at government and non-government organisations, the process is always met with a level of anxiety about the time commitment required by myself and evaluation panel members. But in being, I guess, explained how we would roll this out and educated and trained as part of a package, I guess I shifted my thoughts and was allowed, as I say, to do it at a smaller scale.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And another question for you. How did you find the concept of the anonymous proposals?
I was interested in how the suppliers would react, and we did have some mixed reactions. As you know, suppliers like to put their own branding and try and win contracts based on reputation. In this situation, they don't get the evaluation panel, at least don't get to see any of that branding whilst we're evaluating the submissions. It becomes obvious further down the track when we get to the interview phase, but at the front end you don't get to see that. So I quickly became an advocate of the anonymous approach because, like, we as humans, we naturally have bias towards contractors or suppliers we've worked with before, whether we like to admit that or not. They are familiar to us, and we might have built amicable sort of working relationships with them, and it's a comfortable space. But the anonymous nature of reading these submissions took all that away, and you evaluate based on the information, the evidence that's put in front of you. So I quickly became an advocate of the anonymous approach.
And did you find that hard to convince people within your organisation? Yeah, obviously on the evaluation team.
We firstly had to explain this to our exec and the process, and let them obviously agree for us to use this process, this best valued approach. We then used an education method to speak to the evaluation team and explain why we were using this best value approach, and go through the benefits of it, not dissimilar to some of the information that John's presented today. The evaluation panel was made up of 6 people for this most recent procurement we've done, and by the end of it, in discussion, everyone was very much supportive of the process, and everyone in that evaluation panel had all been through many major procurements in their working careers.
Terrific, thanks, Carl. I'm now going to move on to some of the Q&A from the audience. John, a question for you. For the evaluators, what training was required for the members of the bid team to have gone through?
So we had to invest some time in educating the evaluation team on the different concepts of this approach. And in some cases, we had to get into some of the reasoning behind the different things that we're doing. But typically, we engage them in a few hours, like a couple of hours session, and educate them about the different submittal documents that every supplier will submit. What are we expecting to see in each of the documents? And run them through a lot of examples of what's good versus a bad, and how they're going to be actually using the rating scale. So this is something I haven't touched on. In most organizations, they use the 1 through 10 rating scale. What we are suggesting is to use 1, 5, or 10 rating scale. So again, we had to explain the concept to them, when to apply the 5, when to apply the 10, and when to apply the 1.
Yeah, terrific, thank you. And another question for you, John, there's certainly a few here. Regarding the 6 to 8 pages of submissions, is a pre-qualification required to ensure the best value approach works? So
not at all.
Words, pre-qualification before that. Sorry.
Yeah, not at all. And we actually, if you want to run a true test of that approach, we would recommend do not do any pre-qualification. The process is so efficient. Even if you've got really high number of suppliers submitting proposal, it is very efficient to quickly filter them out within a few days. So in our example, we received 10 different proposals, and in almost 3 days or 4 days maximum, we've been able to finalize that evaluation of the evaluated documents. So the answer to the question, I would not recommend, or it doesn't require really to do any pre-qualification.
Thank you. Another one for you, John. Do anonymous proposals work for professional services procurement?
Absolutely, and this is my favorite ones. Especially when you're engaging like the top 4 suppliers, the top 4 consulting firms, or the major names, the anonymity will take that advantage from the suppliers that really rely on their names, on their branding, and let them really focus on the actual project, and let them really forced to forget about who we are, and let them focus more on how to make you confident as a client on how can we deliver what you need.
Yeah, thank you. Carla, question for you. What challenges did you face or have you faced in using the best value approach within the EPA?
Well, the process was a new one to an organisation, and it had to be presented and signed off by our finance team and exec team. And like anything new, people need to be, it needs to be explained well, need to see past experience and where it's worked well. And using some of the information which we get from Simpler Institute, which have helped us throughout this process, enabled us to explain to our exec and to EPA that this was a good approach, a well-tested approach, and it's suitable for what we were doing in engaging suppliers in the marketplace in Victoria.
And I would add to that, Andrew, that maybe the largest challenge that we faced, especially when you're introducing that approach to a new organization, is the education that you and the training you invest in upfront to explain the process, the different concepts, and the value of doing things differently. So I would say that the biggest challenge is to really get the clients more open to some of these ideas. The suppliers really are very easy to change. They actually like most of these ideas. Most of the suppliers really like the anonymity, the limit pages, that you're actually making the process more efficient. And the feedback I've got from many suppliers that they've told me recently, when we looked at the approach and the documents that we need to submit, we had to cut down a lot of the garbage that we normally throw into our proposals. And we said we cannot do that anymore. We have to really focus about the project, the specific unique risks associated with that, and how can we actually deliver this project in a satisfactory level.
Good, thank you, John. A question for you, John, back on the Prequel discussion. How do you assess very technical submissions without Prequel? How do you ensure compliance?
So I'm not sure if I got the question right. So is he asking about the compliance with the technical specification?
Yes.
Or if he's more looking at, if we have the limited pages, how can we really assess the technical aspects with this number of pages limited? So I would say that think about this process as it has like a different filters. The selection phase, which has the anonymity and the limited pages, are the first filter that you're actually trying to assess the capabilities and expertise of the suppliers. So we would not necessarily want to go into too much technical details at this stage. We want to really focus on singling out the best or the highest qualified vendor at this stage. But then when we invite them through the clarification phase, this is where we go into a lot of more detailed information, including all the technical stuff, all the more detailed stuff, and iron out all these things. So we really go into the weeds of the entire project within this clarification phase. If he talks about the compliance with the specs, I was just having a chat yesterday with someone, and he was mentioning to me that what we have been seeing normally is you issue a big list of technical requirements and you issue that to the supplier, and we have 30% weightings on that as an evaluation criteria. And all you get back from the supplier is a bunch of yeses, yes, 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 yeah, comply. It's similar like when you ask suppliers, would you be able to do that? They will simply say yes. And then I don't think many suppliers will say, no, I really don't comply with that at this moment. And it certainly doesn't help you as an evaluators to differentiate expertise at this moment. So normally on the technical specs, we put it either you can meet them or you cannot meet them. In some cases, we have some flexibility on the approach, like in IT. If someone has a mandatory requirements versus a good to have requirements, there's some changes that we can adapt to cater for those requirements in specific scenarios.
Yeah, okay, terrific. So over to another significant stakeholder, the suppliers. What feedback have you received from suppliers to the best value model approach? I imagine they would certainly like the 6 to 8 pages, but what else can you offer?
So I'll talk maybe on the on what we have seen on the last few projects that we've ran. Normally, when you talk about the anonymity component of the proposals, most companies and most suppliers really love that idea, because it tells them a message that you're actually not going to be influenced by the name of the company. Whether that company has a big name, big brand, you have a certain relationship with them, they are your incumbent, all of these benefits, which has no correlation to performance, are now very, very well minimized. So you have a lot more confidence from the supplier side that we actually gonna have more fair chance at winning this project. And that will encourage them to really invest more time to think about your project and put forward the best quality proposal that they can submit to you. So in most of the occasions, I have never personally encountered any supplier saying this is a bad idea. The people that don't like these ideas is the people say that I hate this idea because I'm not allowed to put my company name there, or I cannot put my branding there. And why they are really complaining about this, because these types of companies, they feel entitled to win the project just because who they are and about their name, about the relationship they have with the supplier. But when you look actually at the performance of the actual team that's going to be working on this project, it has no relationship. It has no relation to the name of the company. And as I mentioned on the slides, an expert supplier, doesn't necessarily mean a name of a company at all. It's all comes back to the people, to the amount of expertise, and have you actually used those expertise to think about our specific projects?
Yeah, thanks, John. We're running out of time here, unfortunately, and we've got lots of questions, but I've got one more here for Carl. Just as a closer, how easy was it for you to do all of this, and what would be your next step if for the audience, if somebody in the audience, beg your pardon, wanted to try running a BV project of their own? What would you suggest was the first steps?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm not a procurement specialist, so the first thing is, I'm a project manager. My first step is to engage the right people, the right procurement or contract sourcing people to assist with this process. I, of course, sat on the evaluation panel as the chair, but I need the expertise, those that understand procurement to do this. It's not something which can be taken on by anyone, and having the experience of John, for instance, in this case, was completely beneficial. I would also reach out to those that have done it before, and reach out to even Simpler Institute in our case, who have been incredible in supplying us support to run our most recent best value procurement for a major contract. There's many nuances in the process that we can't cover in this webinar today. To get the most out of interviewing the suppliers, out of getting the most out of even evaluating or putting your weighting against evaluation, and that sort of information, so it can't be harnessed through this webinar, but can be through engaging with other people who have done the approach before, and that's what I've taken most out of this.
Terrific.
And I would
Thanks,
like to
Carl.
add on that, Andrew, very quickly, is that while we haven't really touched on a very high level concept of this approach, if an organization really needs to set up like as an educational session for the team, I would be happy if they can reach out to me. My contact details are there. And I would say that the education part, the learning and the training is maybe the biggest thing that you need to spend some investment on. And I would say the best educator is to try implementing this concept in an actual project. You will get a lot. You will get the maximum value of implementing this with someone that can really, as Carl mentioned, has done this before, or can really understand the process and the large amount of details that goes behind the scene.
Terrific, thanks, John. I'm just aware, everybody, we've got a hard stop at 1 o'clock here, so we're fast running out of time. Thanks everybody for your participation. Just quickly, John or Carl, do you want any final wrap-up comments you'd like to make? No.
Carl, you want to go first?
Only that. Yeah, I was new to this, and the best thing I did was run it through a smaller procurement process to give me familiarity with it first off, which helped, and help with that education process for our business, the evaluation team, and myself, then gave us confidence to go larger and use it on bigger contracts. And to date, our experience has been excellent, and I'm now a large advocate of best value procurement.
And I haven't mentioned, Andrew, that Carl has been actually with me in this process twice in 2 projects. The first one was a $3 million project, and we've actually, the entire process was actually done in 7 weeks from start to end. And you can see the amount of satisfaction and the level of professionalism of the supplier that we have received was really great. And that gave us the courage to go into the higher value procurement.
Thanks, John. Many thanks to everyone for joining for the webinar. Special thanks to our presenter, John Matter, and our client, Carl Gray. And also special thanks to Chris Doolan from ProSkill, who has generously sponsored this webinar, and that you consider ProSkill for your PPE needs when you're next sourcing. To all our attendees, we hope you found it interesting and thought-provoking. A copy of the webinar and a list of any of the unanswered questions will be emailed to each of you over the next few days.